No? Is anybody listening with translation? Everyone understands, so for the record, it must be translated for the record. Okay. So, in the program, I am the coordinator of the, and there are two of us, so we're going to coordinate, we're going to co-coordinate, we'll co-present. My name is Christopher Crimes. I come from France. I've been living there for many, many years. And I'm using my present foundation's presentation just to indicate the little circuit I made over the last 40 years in France. When I started up here in this little red, in Le Havre, where I was very lucky to meet Oscar Niemeyer, this famous Brazilian architect, building La Maison de la Culture, amazing structure, but we were in the end of the 70s, the beginning of the 80s. So as much concrete as possible, as much grey energy consumed as possible. I mean, there was no control, there was no thought about it, just get on with it. I then went down to Mâcon in Burgundy. That's where the start of my real circuit started, because I suddenly understood that France, a land of culture, a land of food, but also a land of wine. And so I started in Mâcon. And in fact, working in the cultural area was just a pretext to discover new vineyards, new wine production. It's also a little thing that I know it's difficult sometimes. I love humor. So don't take what I'm saying for read, you know, it's it. In Mâcon, I was already into, because of the wine growers, because of the this beginning awakenness. This was in 1984 when I moved to Mâcon. Beginning awakenness of pollution, and notably from pesticides and so on in the whole area, and also major problems of rising water levels. We were already into that with the Saône River, which was coming through, which was very, very regularly overflowing, flooding the city, and also flooding the theater. And so the theater had to be redesigned because to take into consideration these problems which are linked into high water levels in the Saône River. We rebuilt the theater, we rebuilt the exhibition park also, and again, the building materials being used, there was no real consideration either of what the environmental quality was, and above all, at the end of the works, the building works, there was just a big hole made, and everything that was left was put into the big hole, covered over, and that was a car park. We're in 85, 86. I then moved to, in 92, to the very east of France. You see I'm trembling, I can't keep myself still. I don't know if it's illness or the white wine or perhaps just impressions. In Mulhouse. And Mulhouse, I was very lucky to work with another interesting architect called Claude Vasconi. And Claude Vasconi made many buildings, but he made two notable cultural centers, one in Montpellier, which is the Le Quorum, made out of granite, and Mulhouse, La Filature, same design, a very big venue, with aluminium cladding. You know, it's one of the most environmentally friendly ideas for building, for cladding aluminium. It was a big, major venue. We had the orchestra, we had the ballet, we had a mediathèque and so on. So it was a big cultural venue, and I was very lucky to be able to propose the artistic direction, the running of this center for 15 years. And that was where I really became aware in Mulhouse, in the east of France, of what pollution was about. For two reasons. First of all, my son and my daughter, who were at that time 11, 12, and 14, started having eczema, starting having breathing problems, starting having running eyes. And the doctor didn't really understand what it was about. And suddenly we became aware, after 2 years operation of the filature, that this aluminium cladding was suddenly becoming like a, I don't know what, like a leopard. A lot of stains on it. And so obviously we called in the architect because we have a guarantee and so on, and we called the architect in, and the presentation was, yes, the result of the analysis was, it's air pollution. We're just on the border with Switzerland, we're just on the border with Basel. And Basel is a major industrial city, and the predominant wind that comes from the east or southeast was actually bringing acid rain from the building pollution and falling onto the filature. And so there was obviously a lot of need to change things. I'm going to insist on that, just saying that pollution, something that's happening to our everyday life, something that's happening in our individual lives also, in our professional lives, it's suddenly becoming palpable, visible. I then moved to the west of France, to Angers, for another new building, which was built on the motor region standards. I can't remember what they're called, 2020 or something like that. Yeah, 2020, yeah. That was back so we're back in, I can't remember now, 2005, 2006. Latest environmental standards, very good insulation, I'm sorry. And also, the roof planned to have gardens and so on to limit greenery, to limit the impact of the sun on the building. Unfortunately, the mayor didn't like this idea of greening, and so we had a terrace with a restaurant, and so a part of the impact that was supposed to be diminished was no longer there. I opened that theatre, ran it for only 3 years, and then I had the very lucky opportunity to go to the south of France, to Montpellier. Just to go back to when I got to Mâcon. Mâcon is great white wine. Mulhouse is in Alsace, it's fantastic wine. Then I went across to Angers, Pays de la Loire, fantastic white wine. And now down to Montpellier, again, fantastic wine, better on the red than the red. So, had I had more time in my professional career, perhaps I should have gone to Bordeaux just to finish correctly. But anyway, I stopped in Montpellier because I was almost at the limit of age. And there I moved into a very specific area called a park, which is 27-acre park, called Le Domaine d'Eau. And this 27-acre park is given over to theatre, given over to music, to dance, all sorts of activities, because there have been many festivals there, 5 every year, which are organized during the summer. And this park closed down during the winter because there was no activity. And so my mission was to come in and propose a new project for the winter period. And so we worked on seasonality, we worked on climate change, we worked on a lot of subjects that were born from the fact that this park was sleeping during the winter, and just how can we manage to be in this sleeping park with new events, new performance, and so on. And the project that I proposed, which was accepted by the board, was to work on the environment, to work on biodiversity in the park, which is in the center of a city, and also build a new eco-responsible theatre. So this was the last of the buildings that I was lucky to accompany with the architects, with the local authorities. And I'm just going to ask now to have a look at this 11-minute video, which shows the construction of this theatre called the Théâtre Jean-Claude Carrière, which was a very innovative way of building a theatre, because from the first piece of building work to the actual reception of the theatre, 6 months, which is a very, very short time. And obviously, we're in the south, obviously we're in this park, and so the considerations about the environment, the considerations about the impact in the urban area were extremely important. And included in these considerations were the fact that we need to insulate as much as possible, not only for thermic reasons, but also for acoustic reasons. If we're having good performances going on, then the planes, the tramways, and so on cannot be, should not be heard in the theatre. And the other aspect, which was innovative at that time, only LED lighting. LED lighting because they emit much less heat and also much less electric consumption. And that was a problem that we had to come into with the artists, because the aesthetics of LED lighting does not agree with many artists' way of thinking of their performance, of their stage setting. And so we had to adapt, and we had to train, and we had to accompany the artistic companies into this LED-only lighting. It was a big constraint. And in fact, some of the artists refused to come. They refused the invitation because, no, if we're going to have to change aesthetics, then we don't want to come. So, okay, that's fine. Unfortunate, but it's fine, we can go on. So, I'm going to show this 11-minute video, which is in French for both of the commentaries, so I'm sorry about that. And then I'm going to ask Noé Bache, who is a friend now of different levels, which is why we propose this sustainable idea, because this building is perhaps the last of its type that should be built today. Any new building should be much more responsible in the way it is using materials, in the way that the actual building up to should limit pollution, what we call the grey energy. And Noé Bache has become a big specialist in that recycling. So after the video, Noé will come up and we'll go the full circle to how we use reusable material. Could we go with the video? Thank you. Montpellier. Thank you for coming. So that was when I was swimming in the Mediterranean after a very good meal, which was on the side of the beach. And here was the sunset that my wife perceived because I was already getting ready to look at my video. C'est bon. The one on the left? I think that's the open one.
Nous avons ici un parc magnifique de plus de 20 hectares départemental, tout accolé à Montpellier.
So this is the Mendo. You can see the park with the chateau in the middle. Jean-Claude Carrière, a very well-known writer, author.
Encore une fois, un geste d'optimisme, une sorte même, je dirais, de pari sur l'avenir du théâtre. Voilà, le département a parié que le théâtre survivrait.
As you can see, the theatre Jean-Claude Carrière with the big top and also an open-air amphitheatre of 1,600 seats. This is the architect's presentation, Philippe Cervantes.
Du Conseil général pour produire un bâtiment démontable déjà. Donc il y a une approche constructive très particulière et parfaitement respectueuse de l'environnement. La préconisation d'une construction bois était pratiquement impérative, donc on a projeté un bâtiment en bois massif. Ça participe aussi à l'idée d'abîmer le moins possible ce site exceptionnel. Donc l'idée c'est de venir poser un objet un certain temps et de pouvoir, le jour venu, pouvoir repartir ailleurs et poser ses valises sur un autre endroit. On vient bâtir une dalle avec ses fondations propres et sur cette dalle, on vient poser des panneaux de bois. Donc c'est des panneaux préfabriqués qui sont taillés à la dimension imposée par nos bureaux d'études, qui arrivent sur le chantier taillés à la bonne mesure avec l'emplacement des portes, des fenêtres, certaines réservations éventuellement. Ce sont 2 murs de bois massif avec un isolant intermédiaire et une fois sur place, il n'y a plus qu'à les assembler. Et l'avantage, évidemment, c'est que ça va très très vite, puisque c'est un chantier qu'on va livrer en quelques mois seulement.
En niveau façade, on est à 7000 m². Il y a 14 travées pour la partie salle et scène. Donc 14 travées de 13,50 m de haut, avec double panneau par mur. On emploie beaucoup les vis. Par pied de ferme, par exemple, on a plus de 300 vis. C'est un assemblage bois-métal. Ouais.
Il y a un travail d'ingénierie très très fort sur de tels projets. Tout ce qui arrive sur le chantier est déjà parfaitement réglé, calpiné, c'est millimétrique. Très en amont, c'est des projets qui sont non seulement dessinés, mais aussi étudiés main dans la main avec nos bureaux d'études, mais aussi avec les entreprises. Oui. Chacun amène son plus grand savoir. C'est une double réussite, le peu de temps en conception et le peu de temps en réalisation. Donc il faut une équipe hyper soudée là-dessus.
C'est très beau d'aller vers un objet théâtral, un magnifique objet en plus, qui va survivre à tout ce qui va se passer à l'intérieur. Faire des projets d'avenir sur quelque chose qui ne dure qu'un moment, une représentation théâtrale, c'est un très beau paradoxe. Et ça m'avait énormément plu. La seconde chose qui m'a plu, bien entendu, c'est quand on m'a dit que c'était un théâtre biodégradable. Moi, je suis un écologiste de la première heure depuis très longtemps, et qu'il était modulable et qu'il ne nuisait en rien à l'écologie, que le bois était spécialement tiré de certaines forêts, etc.
Il y avait une volonté très très forte du Conseil général et du maître d'ouvrage d'avoir un bâtiment très ancré dans son époque par rapport au développement durable. Donc il y a une technologie qui est mise en place sur ce théâtre, l'éclairage LED, qui offre deux avantages majeurs. D'abord, de moins consommer directement dans la production quand on fait du spectacle, et surtout de moins produire de chaleur, donc moins de climatisation derrière.
I don't think we need to go into the protocol, the opening and the building. Just to say that in the design process, there was also the idea that it can be deconstructed to be rebuilt elsewhere, which was also something we don't have in the theatre. I mean, you can do it with big tops, but with solidly built theatre, it is not. It is 95% deconstructible. It's just the platform, which obviously is not deconstructible. So, Noé Bache, architect, he's going to present himself anyway. Engineer, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Noé.
Thank you, Christopher. Yes, first thank you for inviting me here to present to you our work, and I hope that it can be interesting for you to develop that in Eleusis 2021 and continue to speak together. I'm Noé Bache. I'm the founder of two structures, Mobius, in which we try to reuse material constructions to give them a second life, and Lab Engineering, which is a bureau which advises architect, engineer, constructor, to make sustainable buildings. First of all, just for another understanding, some mathematical points. That's a linear function. Why am I speaking for that? Because that is really easily understandable for anybody. Why? Because if y is equal to x, then 1 goes to 1, 2 goes to 2, 3 to 3. That's really easy to understand. And in real life, if you buy 1 apple per day, day 1 you have 1 apple, day 2 2 apple, day 3 3 apple, and then you can imagine that day 50 50 apples, day 100 100 apples. That's really easy to understand. And we like to see the evolution of life like this, like just a linear function. But actually, everybody knows that it's a little bit more that. There is another function. This is the exponential function, which is a factor function, and which is more difficult to understand for our mind. Let's just explain that. If you have, for example, a factor 2, and that you said that on day 1, on day 2, you buy 2 apples, on day 3, you buy then factor 2, 4 apples, on day 4, 16 apples, on day 5, you have 256 apples, and that's really difficult to imagine. How many apples will you have on day 50 or on day 100? It's really difficult for our mind to imagine that. Other said, this is the professional card of Clémence. Clémence, which worked for us, which is not here, but she was there 2 days ago. It's a card of 1 millimeter. If you fold this card 22 times, it will make you a thickness of 3,000 kilometers. And you can really imagine that. And 3,000 kilometers is the distance between Paris and Athens, only to fold a card of 1 millimeter 22 times. Why do I have to say that? It's just that we are in an era where many issues are working on exponential. For example, the total world population is exponential. The rise in energy consumption is currently exponential. The GDP per capita is exponential. The global use of water also, and you have many issues that that are working like this exponential function. For example, the number of McDonald's restaurants, the number of telephone devices, that's always exponential. Why is that a problem? The thing is that it's a problem for the carbon emissions that are also exponential. Why is it a problem? Because this is the greenhouse effect. We need the greenhouse effect. We need a layer of carbon. Why? Because if we don't have that, we will have too much energy on Earth. And if you have too much energy, we cannot live on Earth because it will be too hot. Then we need this carbon layer in order that we have less energy coming from the sun. And on the other hand, it maintains heat on the Earth. The problem is when we are just emitting by our behavior on Earth, we are emitting much more energy, much more carbon than it already needs. That's why the temperature on Earth is always correlated to our carbon emissions, to the concentration of carbon in the air. And what happens now, or since 150 years, since the first industrial revolution, is that we emit lots of carbon, and then our temperature, our mean temperature on Earth is rising and rising and rising. Okay, why is that a problem? No, just before, on what is that linked? Here you can see which country are emitting the most CO2 emission. You can see the best one is the Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Then on 3rd March is Australia. After that comes the United States. In Europe, we are a bit less than everything, than all those emissions. But it's interesting to see on what CO2 emissions are linked. If we take the map of the gross domestic product per capita, you can see that it's quite the same. What is the conclusion of that? The thing is, the more that you produce, the more that you consume, the more rich you are, and the most you are emitting. And if we just look at this is the GDP of China, last 15 years, and here you can see the total energy consumption. There is a link between the GDP and the energy and material consumption. The more you earn money, the more you make GDP right now, the more you are consuming energy and material, and then the more you are emitting CO2. And then now we are in the Anthropocene. That's an era which is significant because it says that on this era, the human being has transformed his environment and also the lithosphere. What means that? Is that we have emitted so much that we have modified the water cycle, we have modified the desertification, the biodiversity, the soil quality, the ocean, and also we changed the climate. And to what is that linked? If we look just at the source of European emissions, you can see that the most of it is energy, our households, so housings, offices, and manufacturing, and also transportation. And if you run a theater or a festival, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same things that will emit CO2. So, said more easily, it's about energy, the energy which is needed to heat displays, to light displays. After that, you have the materials, the seats, the windows. How do you came here? I came with a plane from Paris to Athens. Then after I took the bus to Elevsina. The consumption goods. So do you have an iPhone? How many times do you change it? Do you change it each year, or is your cell phone 10 years old? The food. Have you eaten fish from the sea close to here, or an Argentinian steak this on lunch? That's really different into CO2 impact. The waste. Have you drink a coffee this morning in a plastic cup or in a cup of glass? That's really different because it's not the same thing on the matter of durability. And also water. Drinking water or bottled water is not exactly the same in terms of CO2 emissions. What can we do? That's why we founded first lab engineering. We will focus now on the construction, on the energy and CO2 that we can save in this construction. Lab engineering, what I say, we advise architect, engineer, promoter in construction in order to save energy and CO2. The first thing that we do is how you can lower the energy needs of a building. And then you have to interest you to the climate, which is surrounding the building. If you are conceiving a building in Norway or in Greece, it's not really the same. They don't have the same needs. They will not have the same energy consumption. And you can use climate to reduce those energy consumption. After that, you always need a device to heat or to refresh your building. And then you will have to deal with energy efficiency. What is the best device to feed your building with energy? After that, you interest you to renewable energy. How can you produce hot water or heating with sustainable energies? I say with that, you have the sun, which can produce heating, electricity. You have the wind with windmills. You can produce electricity too. And you always have to think about your thermal and natural lighting comfort. Just an example. What we study, those are the temperature in Paris, and here you have the prevailing wind. Why do we look at that? It's because, do I have a problem of air conditioning? No, it's not really the problem, but I have a problem with heating. That are things that can advise you on what you have to do on this building. Others said, just not conceive a building, construct a building, and after that look at, okay, how do I have to heat this building, how to refresh it. Just you have to think on that, on the conception directly, and interest you on what is the climate here. How can you use the prevailing wind in order to refresh naturally the building? This example, that's a project that we make 6 or 7 years ago. It was an international competition for a bioclimatic European school in Crete. And we designed this building which is surrounded with a curtain. Why? Because we have all the rooms inside, and actually it's boxes in a box. And why do we think about that? It's just that in the summer, the curtain is open, and then you can naturally ventilate all those spaces, all the classrooms. We designed foundation which can just refresh the hot outside air, and then make that into the classes in order to refresh that naturally. And those are principles that do not need energy, so fossil energy. And in the winter, we just close the curtain in order to absorb the energy from the sun, make a thermal buffer in order that this place can be heated naturally too. And you have the cold air outside, and you can use the energy of the earth in order to heat this, to preheat this air in order to make this air into the classroom. And here also you don't need any fossil fuels to heat this building. And you can also do that with, you can use the water from the rain in order to store it and use it for the toilets, for the cleaning. That's really, really easy to do. And that's also so water that you will not use from pumping it from the earth. You will also design PV panels that can produce those energy there. And those are really easy principles that you can just provide into the conception of your building. If you're architect, engineer, or just user of that building, just think about this in order to save energy and carbon. We make that currently on other buildings, so houses, offices, principally in France, but we also work last month on that. This is the UNO in Africa. And those buildings are new buildings, but we also work on refurbishments. That's an office in Paris close to Gare Montparnasse. This is an office that has been built for 30 or 40 years. That's the inside. It's not really new, but it has 15 years. And in the sector of offices, when you rent an office, you have a lease of 3, 6, or 9 years. And each 12 years, those offices are refurbished. And if you come 1 week later, it looks about that. And that's a real problem now. Why? Because all the raised floor, all the carpet, all the insulation, all the partition, all the desk, all the chairs, all the lighting goes just to the waste. Why? Because today it's not in the mentality. And all these materials, this energy and its carbon and its material, then what can we do about that? That's why we founded Mobius, which advise and produce materials that can be reused. Just the global issues. That's the figures for France. The national waste production is 850 million tons each year of waste. And mainly for 40%, it's the construction sector. That's a huge amount. Also, if you look here, this it's a table of, for example, for copper here, it's estimated that in 2044 we won't have copper anymore because we are extracting too much minerals, materials from the earth to, for buildings, for example. Another example is gold. In 2030, we won't have gold anymore, and that's a big problem for your electronic devices, as your cell phones or your computer. And if you look here, diamonds, it's 2017, so passed from 1 year. Actually, there are always diamonds, but the thing is that since last year, and it has been proved, it's less expensive to synthesize diamonds than to dig deeper and deeper to take diamonds from the earth. And that's a bit what it said. It's when you are using lots of minerals, lots of materials, at one point it becomes really, really difficult to extract those materials. And that's why it becomes globally less cheaper and cheaper to extract those minerals. And the other thing is the energy. When you build a house 150 years ago, you have two kinds of energy in a building. The energy of what we say home energy is the energy that you use, that you consume for heating, ventilating, refreshing, for your lighting, for your devices, your computer. And the other part of the energy for a house is what we call the gray energy. It's the energy which is incorporated in the materials that you need for constructing this building. Then, 100 years ago, the gray energy was really low. Why? Because you were just constructing with the materials that were in your vicinity. So stones, wood, and so on, so natural material. But you consume a lot of home energy. Why? Because those buildings were not good insulate, for example, and we're using a lot of energy. And 100 years after, say today, we have almost 50%, so sorry, in the lifetime of a building, you have 50% of energy which is used for the home energy and 50% for the gray energy. We are coming close to the parity. And that said, how can we reduce this gray energy here? Reuse of material is one of the solutions. This is the Agora of Athens, so an illustration, how that it was maybe 2,500 years ago, and that it's today. It's really interesting to see that the Agora looks like that today, okay, because of the weather condition, because of the wars, but also because people have taken those stones to build other buildings. And that's interesting to see. It's not only the time or the weather, it's just at one time we just took other buildings which didn't have the good function anymore to build other buildings. And take new materials to construct building. It's in the history of the humanity it's quite nothing because we start to use new materials since 150 years, so close to the Industrial Revolution. So what can be done? First thing, if you have a building, just refurbish it and reuse it maybe for another purpose. That's what we saw this morning with the industrial heritage, that there are lots of buildings in Greece that have been industry and that are reused for museum, for exhibition, and so on. Second thing is not to demolish, but to deconstruct building in order to reuse the material that are inside. And also, you can take one building, deconstruct it, and use it on another place. And I will give you a few examples for all that, for these 4 topics. That's an old hospital in Paris. It's really huge. You have 10 buildings. It has not been used as a hospital since 5 years. And then 2 associations have reused all those buildings to make what? Each building has another function. These 2 associations makes what? Housings for people in need, housing for migrants inside this building, because formerly you have just rooms for the hospital, and then these rooms just becomes housings. They also make exhibition, markets on those places, concerts. You also have restaurant, bars, and also a camping. I think it's the only one camping inside Paris. And all that can be done. If you have a building that lost its own function, you can also reuse it in another function. Especially in 5 years, all this building will be transformed into new housings, new offices. All that will be refurbed. But in the duration of the closing of the hospital and the beginning of the construction site, there will be 5 or 6 years, and all that is possible during this time. We worked on this site. We were advisor for the deconstruction of 2 buildings. 2 buildings, each one like this one. It's 2 times 1,000 square meters. The first thing that we have done is that we just look at each material. It's a diagnosis of the whole building. Each window, each radiator, each seat, each square meter of carpet. We have all listed all these materials, given them a status. Is it easily reusable or not? And after that, we send it to hundreds of associations in Paris. What was the purpose? The thing was that it is really expensive to say to a company, okay, please just disassemble the radiator, please deconstruct the window. Why? Because you need time, and the problem is that in the construction in France, and I think in Europe it will be the case, when you buy a construction of €1 million, you will expend almost 800,000 euro just in time for workers or in time for architects. And in a building, the price of the materials are only almost 20% of the overall price. Then in this case, this is not worth so much money. But if an association comes and just deconstruct the radiator or anything for themselves use, here there is a rentability which is coming, and we have done that. Then each association sends us a mail, okay, and we just respond, okay, that's what you want from our catalog. Those materials are placed here, and here are what you will take, and you need that tool, you need that insurance. It will be deconstructed on this way, and we have to follow all this association, and that we have done that during 2 weeks. We have persons that never have done electricity, that have taken lightning. We have also took material from the outside. Radiator, for example, they have been sold. There's a company that had pursued this radiator. The company after that will just make the fresh new peinture. Tell me. What? Just to make it new, a new color, they will refixed it and they resold it after that. We also have done that with the exteriors. And here we have some data. Actually, that's the percentage of reuse of all the materials inside the building. You can see that for electrical things, we are at 70%. For heating, ventilating, also 70%. For, that's all the doors, inside doors, that's 100%, close to also all the furnishing, 100%. It was a bit more difficult for the structure, but you can see here that you have, in average, 60% of things that have been reused from these two buildings. If we just calculate which amount of energy or CO2 that we have saved 20 tons of materials. This is 32 tons of CO2. Actually, having saved all these materials is like take your car and make a world tour 6 times. That's the comparison between taking back these materials and running your car. Another example, that was the construction. That's why how you can reuse a building, how you can reuse materials. And here, that's a new building. That's a synthetic image. It's a building of 30,000 square meters. The promoter of this building, the contractor, he wants to be the France champion of reuse of materials. And then he said, okay, all the raised floor in this building office will be from reuse. So just to explain what a raised floor is, here the raised floor is that. In an office, in a new office in France, in Germany, in Greece, everywhere, you have this raised floor. Why? Because you need to put all your electrical internet cables below the floor in order to ease the partitioning of the building. And this floor, it's really simple. It's wood on 30 millimeters, 60 per 60 centimeter, and you have aluminium on 5 faces of this piece of wood. And what we have done, is that we select a construction site where there will be refurbed or demolished, and we go on it. We just look at all those materials that will be just thrown away. We say to the demolition company, okay, we buy you those raised floor. If I buy you that, please make it on pallets and circle it. Then we make the transportation. We have a workshop in the north of Paris. There's Amara and Sissoko. They are just strapping the glue on these materials, because the thing is that you glue the carpet on this piece of wood, and the glue is flowing on the intersection of it, and you have also glue on it. Then you have to strap the glue here on the sides, and you also have to remove the glue on the surface. I introduce you Cedric and Frank, which are doing that. And after that, we just put it on pallets, and we test all the materials in order to go back to the norm, because it has to be as good as new materials, and you also have to make those tests in laboratory in order to have an insurance. For each product in the construction in France, you need to have a 10 years insurance, and for that, just go to laboratory. And that's our workshop. That's make lots of materials and lots of carbon, which is saved. That can also be done for a global building. That's the House of Reuse that has been made, and it was in front of the town hall in Paris during 2 or 3 years. This building is composed at 80% of reused material. For example, the structure. The timber structure has been taken from a building that has been deconstructed. Also the insulation. Also, if you can see, the facade is made out of, as you can see, all doors, exactly. And this is now possible to have buildings that are composed. It's an example. It's a very tiny building. It's 200 meters. But for example, for a festival, for an exhibition, that is possible if 2 years before the construction, you just have to create a network. That's the point. Reuse of material. It's really local. You have to know each people, that each artisan, each company have the construction. Do you have that? Will you have that? In order to make a calendar of, okay, we have at disposition next year all that materials, and we can conceive this building because we have this network. That's COP21, the conference for the climate, 3 years ago. And it was quite interesting because that is the building that that received this conference, and you can see that's quite a huge building. It looks like a sport hall actually. It's made of timber, of wood. It can be constructed, then deconstructed, and constructed again. And that's what it looks like. And 2 days ago, I received a mail that said, "Hi Noé, this may interest you." And I received the plan of all the building, this one, and it was just saying, the building is deconstructed. It's stored since 1 year in the north of Paris, and in 2 months it goes to the waste if we do not anything. And now they are looking for a person that will take over this thing. And that's for free. It's 4,000 square meters, and it's free. It's totally free. Why? Because the owner of this building will have to pay to make it to the waste. And if we pay for make it to the waste, it will be waste. The better things that can made out of this wood is to make again wood, or it will be burned to make energy. But there's a lot of carbon that will be emitted because this construction is not reused anymore. And then we are looking for an owner in the next 2 months. That was globally what I wanted to say about the reuse of material. Just the future is not so dark as we can hope, or as many people want to say. I just made some statistic. Just with our furniture, our reuse of raised floor, one raised floor is almost 40 kilo of CO2 per square meter saved. Actually, if you reuse that floor and that you do not buy a new floor, it's 40 kilo per square meter that is saved. We have furnished 20,000 square meters in 3 months. That's called 80,000 per year. Then per year we can save 3,000 tons of CO2. Okay, in our company in Mobius there are only 6 persons that are charged for the raised floor. That makes 500 tons per CO2 per person saved in our company. One Frenchman, it's 7 tons of CO2 per year. That said, is one person by us compensated for 70 Frenchmen. We are 70 million people in France, and that said, if 1 million people find solution like we do for construction, we have only to be 1.5% of the population, and that's really nothing. That's really, really nothing. It's not 30, it's not 40 or 50%, it's 1.5% of the population. Voilà, thank you. May you have some questions? Yes.
For this UN building?
For this building, I had the owner on the phone yesterday, and he told me that you will have to pay 100,000 euros for the transportation, and almost 400,000 for rebuilding it. But they buy it new for €2 million. That's it's quarter the price of it, actually.
It's worth it.
Exactly. You save energy, you save carbon, but also money. And that's interesting. It's not always the case, but that's quite interesting in this case. Yep. Somebody else? If you have questions on French wine, Christopher can answer you. Yes.
Perhaps examples that you know in proximity of your own daily life or professional life where
I don't have an answer for your question, but because I was listening to your presentation, I thought that the huge problem that Athens is facing is like the reuse of some abandoned places, some abandoned houses or former state buildings, and I think that this is quite an interesting way to turn these buildings back to life. And so I think that especially Greece and Athens can really adopt this way of using and this way of looking into these buildings. That's why, because we have lots of abandoned places which are not used, so that's why.
The thing is that we what we understood is that just we talk about the thing about the raised floor. We know that we would have a mentality problem, just to say, okay, we want your waste, please give it to us. We know that we will have this kind of problem, and we also know that we will have technical problem and insurance problem. And actually, we solved the problem of insurance and technical first. And the major problem is mentality. It's always that. It was really, really difficult to make understandable that we take waste, we transform it, and it's not waste anymore. And you will use that, like you make that for your car, for your cell phone, for your TV, or something else. And it's what you said is it's always about mentality and human energy. So I want to do that. We can do that together. How can we find the path to make that? Because it's just logical to make it. Yes.
The example of the hospital was very interesting, and what you did by bringing in the associations to dismantle the building piece by piece.
Yeah.
I am curious how you solved technical insurance problems. For example, you have lay people dismantling electricity things, and how did you solve the whole logistics of the workers that were not official workers, just people from the associations? How did you do that?
First thing, you have the demolition study always. There's always engineers that make a building study of the demolition in order to say, okay, that's safe or not safe. And first, if it's for association or for professional, you have to make in order that nobody will be harmed or hurt with, don't know, chemical things or not. Secondly, you have to say to this association, okay, you have to have an insurance, so civil responsibility for that. Sorry? Association. Okay, the association has to have a civil responsibility in order that if, I don't know, something happened, it's not the problem of the owner of the building. And also you have to write, we prepared, how do you say that? Just the paper that says that in any case you will not pursue on court the owner of the building, and also cut the water, cut the electricity, so all the fluids of the building are cut before. And also our job was to follow them and to say, okay, just do that, do that, just be patient, and everything will be good. And we had no problem. And actually, it was it was only interior materials, it was not structural, then it's really easy. It's not easy, but yeah, it's really easier to do that. Thanks.
Following up on Elena's questions and remarks,
Yeah.
All these topics that you raise about reuse and change of mentality and these types of debates, I would say, have an environmental aspect and a social aspect as well, which involves also legal, state issues and things like that. And in many cases, in Greece, probably in France as well, this involves a point of convergence between what we understand as formal economy and informal economy. So, for instance, in Greece, in Athens, there are people that browse through the neighborhoods with a van to collect scrap metal, but there's no insurance. It's so. How do you relate to these issues? Are these issues that you have encountered?
Yeah, exactly. The first thing, where does the material comes from? Actually, demolition company are doing reuse since 100 years. For example, a demolisher told me, okay, you see all the lightning that goes to Poland, and all the doors, they go to Mali in Africa. And okay, and our job is just to say, okay, from this informal economy, make it formal. And to say, okay, there is something, there is energy, there is carbon, but as you say, there is also social, because that are new jobs that can be created. It's not just demolishing, it's deconstructing. And deconstructing, you need to be formed to that. And it's logical of, I would not say better job, but you need to be formed, and then you know that those kind of jobs will currently reappear, and maybe it's, I don't know, it's maybe a better things for social, I don't know. Yeah, it's very informal. There is no insurance at that point. Actually, there is insurance. There are two types of insurance. For your housing, if you buy a lighting on the Sunday afternoon, I don't know, from second hand to your neighbor, and that on Monday there is a fire in your place, and that comes from this lightning, you are covered, because the insurance of your house covers almost everything. You can do anything in second hand in your house when it is constructed or when you had buy it. That's not the same for, say, state buildings or private buildings from more than, who received people from the outside. That's not possible anymore. And then you need to have this insurance. And I give you the example of the raised floor. It was not easy, but it was also not so difficult to have this insurance, because you just look at the norm that the state needs from you. It's about how many kilograms you can load on these floors. After how many kilograms the floor break, acoustic, fire, and electromagnetic. Electromagnetic, there is no issue, because it's wood, then it cannot incorporate electricity. Acoustic, that you are making those tests on the site when everything is finished. That said, when the carpet is here, the partitions, then you just make that test on the construction site. And actually, the acoustic comes not really from the floor, in terms of acoustic insulation between two rooms, or between one floor and another. Fire, there is a law text that said that 30 millimeters of wood gives you that class of fire protection. And then you have to do nothing to say that, okay, this piece of wood, this piece of raised floor is good in terms of norm just legally. The only thing that we had to make is go to a laboratory and just test it for the loads and the braking of the system. And actually, it's only 30 millimeter wood and a piece of metal sheet. That's, after 30 years, it would also be the same. Actually, it's not a problem for that. And that's a question in the reuse of material. There are certain materials that are more easily reusable than others. And first, you have to reuse, that's what we're doing. Material where there are only one or two different material. For example, with the raised floor, there is only wood and metal. No mechanic piece, because when you have a mechanic piece in a device, that's said that you will have, it can be braked or it can be alterated. So, to answer to your question, if it's in France, if it's used for housing, there is really no problem. If it's used for bigger buildings, you have to have this insurance, then take the norm, and then go to laboratory to have this 10-year insurance. And that's the work of the next 5 or 10 years for each material. The material are existing. It's never a problem technically, insurancely. It can be resolved, but the first thing is really culturally. So just don't waste it, reuse it. And that's the most difficult today. Yes? Hi.
First of all, I'd like to say that it was a bright project, the one with the school.
Yeah.
But I think it was a project from the start, from the scratch. You know,
yeah.
It was for sustainable architecture, but
yeah.
it was from scratch.
Yeah.
So you had the opportunity to think for all the things involved with environment
yeah.
From the beginning. So this was a bright example. But I'd like to ask you something about the other examples you gave us for the reuse of the materials.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm okay with the reuse and repurpose of the materials, but I'd like to ask you if we reuse the materials, the existing materials. For example, you said you took out the pieces of floor
yeah.
and you had
glue on it.
You had a glue on it, yes, and then you scratched the...
Scrap the glue, yes.
Yeah, and then you put it back,
yeah.
no? Yes. I was wondering, do these materials have the qualities of a new one?
Yeah.
Of a brand new one with, with new technical characteristics, sustainable,
yeah.
or the quality, so as the building to have
a standard, actually. It's the norm, and what the architect and engineer ask us, does it correspond to the last standard of construction? And we have to check every line of what the standard said. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's capacity, it's fire, it's acoustic, it's...
let me complete
the
question. Okay, so maybe it will have the standards, but yeah. will the cost be, as if they had a new one?
Yeah.
So, okay, we have less CO2, less waste, yeah. But is it possible that we have more expenses?
It's possible. No, for the cost of the raised floor, now we're 20% less than new one, and for the same quality, that's said.
Okay.
We can be 20%, we are 20% less expensive than new. If you, all materials today are not made. The thing is that the cost of energy and material is less too cheap than it has to be. if we want to think about sustainability. For example, if you take, maybe not DOOs, but DOOs lightnings, if you deconstruct it, you make it on pallets, you stock it, you transport it, it will be more expensive than new ones. That's sure, today, I would say today, because there is no industry of that. But if you take, let's say, heating devices, air conditioning devices, you took it and you make it to another place, it costs less than new ones. But you have to find, there are kind of materials that are more expensive. It's really easy to calculate it. If you go to IKEA and you take chairs, a table from IKEA, you can't be you can be cheaper with reuse as IKEA. But on the other hand, if you have an IKEA chair, it will last 3-4 years, something like that. But if you buy, I don't know, a table that costs 300, 400, 500 euros, that will last for 30, 40, 50 years. And you also have to take that into account. But yes, if it's cheap, not cheap material, but you can, for carpet, for example, you cannot be competitive with new carpet because it costs nothing when you buy it new. It's only, so not only, but if you look at the material that costs a lot of money when it's new, there is a lot of chance that if you reuse it, you are competitive. Another example is the wall partition, especially in glass in France, that costs 150 euro per square meters. And it's made to be constructed and to be deconstructed because it's partitioning. And you can imagine that if it's 150 euro per square meters, on 1 meter large, on 3 meters, you have almost 500 euros, and it takes you what? Half an hour to take it back, to tear it down, and just to make it in another building. There is an economy, that's sure, but start with things that are expensive.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you something related mostly to your office, like your studio.
Yeah.
I saw that you involve a lot. There is a certain aspect of participation in your projects, like even dismantling in this way. It has a social participatory point of view, statement, let's say, like that. So I was wondering how you work as a team. And which is your philosophy amongst you, if you are a collective, or how do you apply certain things in your office day of functioning, everyday life, whatever. And if you have built or thought of building a network, at least in France, or you're collaborating with other groups or offices with similar points of view and practices. And if you have been in any dialogue about a sort of making a handbook out of that. Okay. All these practices that you have been developing, and maybe not only yours, but also of other colleagues and so on.
How did we do that? Just to make you clear, how do we function? So Lab Engineering and Mobius are two different companies, but a bit with the same person, working on that project on one day and the other day, but that's really rare. It's, let's say, only 5 or 10% of the projects. So Lab Engineering, we are 6 people. There are 6 people which are engineers or architects, which advise other architects or engineers how to make them sustainability. And on the other hand, Mobius, we are in separated local. We have bureaus in the center of Paris for the engineering, and as you can imagine, if you want to prepare material, you can do that in the center of Paris, and then we are at 3 kilometers from the center to the north. It's the two local are separated from 40 minutes, something like that. Mobius, we have 2 architects that advise other companies, and we have 6 people that are in the workshop, that are working on those raised floor or on other materials. What is interesting is that we have really different profile in the company. You have architect, engineer, and workers that not each days, but that met together, let's say, one thing issue every 3 months for a big party. And your question is how that we work together. First thing, so I'm the only associate in lab engineering, and we are 3 associates in Mobius. And I think that we have the same global meaning. The first thing is, okay, just do things that are logical and logical for sustainability. So make things that can lower energy consumption, make things that can lower carbon footprint. And we hire people that have also this mentality. We are not just here for making money, but if I want to make money, I go to London in the city and I will make money. And that will be much more easier to feed his refrigerator and to pay his flat. Second thing is that we hire people, and it's really important, I think, that could be our friends. And we are kind of, it's a family, actually. So we like to work in family. We are 15 people, and it's always possible to function with people that, it's just, we don't search the top person. It's only people that, okay, let's say it will function. We don't search the 18 on 20, but if 13 works, and it's really cool to work together, that's the best. What we always say is it has to be funny. If it's not funny anymore, we stop. And it's just that. Yeah, it's easy to say, but we try to function so. After, in the company inside, all the people have different function. For example, by lab engineering, you have Odile is charge of all the competition. Frank is charge of all the label, so sustainable certification. Aaron is doing all the physical simulation. We have Cecilia, which is doing the administration. Simon, which is also doing simulation. So we have, it's a bit siloted as function, but we have all in common the project. So Odile will start the project, then Frank will do the certification, and Aaron will do the simulation. Then you can easily have 2 or 3 persons from the team on the same project. And that's quite interesting because they do not have the same baggage. Odile is architect, Aaron is engineer, and they don't think the same and don't have the same logic. He is more mathematic, she is more artistic, but that's quite interesting to see how those all people are mixed together. And also the link with Mobius is really interesting because lab engineering, that's 80%, it's only computer or paper because we are advisors. So let's say 80% of the competition that we made for buildings are lost, then we are only 1 out of 5 buildings that we conceive that will appear one day on Earth. And then that is say that we have we have much more we make much more conception than construction. Conception is 80% of our time, construction is only 20%. And that is interesting with Mobius, which is 100% real, 100% material. And just to make those people that just come out of the school or who have 2, 3, 4 years of professional life, to see that, hey, look at that. That's not only computer, that's not only an image, but that's real, that's carbon here. And just make you that in your head when you are, after that, conceiving things. And to answer to the network, yes, it's only, everything is only about human relationship. It's only that. And for sustainability, it's almost that. It's only how do you behave with each other. What are your aim? What is my aim? and how can we go together in the same direction. We have a good network in Paris and in the region, more or less in France. We have not made a handbook yet of the good practices because we have only 2 years of existence. Then it's a bit difficult to make to see what we have done with only 2 years of existence. But we have, for example, Les Grands Voisins, donc the hospital. We have just printed. Yes, it's a little book of 30 pages, if you want it, to see what we have done. But exactly, we want to diffuse that. And our global aim, I think, will be, we have done that with the race floor. We have the energy, we have the process, we know how to make it with the insurance. If you want to make that with Windows, I can explain you anything. Okay, just do it, because we can do everything, because we have energy, but not so much, and it's also a thing about money. You need lots of money to make industry, and it's difficult to find. But if other people want to make that in the construction, you want to make that in transportation, okay, I tell you anything, how to make that in agriculture, or that will be one of our aims, what we said, just how to a global collective of you do that, I do that, you do that, I do that, but we are a team together who goes into the same direction of sustainability. That's what we're trying to do. Yes. The first who has a microphone.
It's very simple and very relevant. I would like to know who bought the radiators, which I'm very fond of, and we throw it away so much. The old radiators, I mean, the old heaters.
Yeah, it's a company which is specialized in that. They buy radiators.
They make new ones.
Yeah.
Or no. Or,
exactly. No, they make new one out of old.
Keeping the look of the old ones.
No, it's not only the look.
They clean and repaint. It's the same.
They repaint it, and they are just cleaning it inside it, and just only with water under pressure, and you can clean your radiator, and it goes out for 30 years again, and that's what they are doing.
And it costs. It's expensive then.
It's a bit expensive because it's researched. So, would you prefer an electrical radiator or an old radiator that has a look from the 70s?
Yes.
And it's kind of piece of collection.
Yes.
Exactly.
I thought so.
No, but that's a real question because actually, if you look at the reuse for that, actually design is sustainable because when we reuse furnishing from 30, 40 years, it's totally sustainable. But it's expensive, and there's always this question: is sustainability something for people who have money? Because if you're in Paris and anywhere, if you want to eat biological food, it's 25% more expensive than normal, and someone who has not money will just not think about that, and that's a big question actually. Yeah. Okay. I will be radical now. No, if you want me the solution it's the finance. It's only that. There is money, there is solution, but the money is not in the good companies, and it's just that. Just take that amount of money, place it here and here and here, and please redistribute your money. And it's the finance, and the second thing is the share of a company. If a company is owned by people who don't work in the company, but are only making money in the company to have more money, that's a problem. There's a world problem. Capital is more paid than working. If we do not, I think so, it's a bit radical, but if we do not erase that, there is no solution. And it's the first solution for me. but it's not really easy to do that. Yeah. Not just to give a solution for biological food. That's quite interesting. When you buy a car, let's say a new car for 20,000 euros, and you paid, okay, you have a good, you paid 10 euros per hour. That said that if you buy a car, you are just working for 2,000 hours to buy that car. That's 1.5 years of working. Then you can say, if I buy a bicycle for 150 euro, I saved me 1.5 years of working instead of having a car. And I think for the food it's exactly the same. To think about, okay, if I go every day in the restaurant or if I go in the supermarket to buy food or biological food, which is expensive, do I have not rather to work each week 10 hours less and have my own garden? And I think that we're working too much, because that's a real problem. I just saw, to come here, I expend 0.5 ton of CO2, something like that. And per year, it's 7 tons. Then it's 1 out of 15, just in 4 days. Great. The thing is that, good example, lots of friends of mine, we are all architects or engineers, we are all working a lot, so we have, let's say, 40, 50 hours each week. And when we're going to vacation, we're going, I don't know, in Canada, United States, and anything. Then you are working to earn money. What I said, the most you earn money, the most you consume. The most you consume, the most you emit carbon. And then I think that just say, okay, just work a little bit less. Okay, we have less money, but if we have less money, we will consume less. If we consume less, I need something to have that, then I will make my own food, I will repair my table, my chair, and anything, and can be a solution. But also the finance.
This mentality should pass to the new students of architecture also, because when we go into the university, you know, to become architects, we all imagine that we will come up as Zaha Hadid or Foster or something. But this is better. This is, we should take advantage of the buildings already built and bring them to today.
No, exactly. For me, new buildings are old-fashioned. Actually, it's totally stupid to make a new building if on the other side of the street you have an existing building which doesn't serve to nothing. It will come.
That's what we're trying to do here in Elefsina. We have a lot of abandoned places, abandoned buildings, very important pieces of the local history, and we're trying to give life back and give them to the people from the city, and not create new ones. And we hope we accomplish that.
Do it.
Yeah, well, thank you for nice summing up there. It's also in the context of 2030, and as you know, 2030 is the real tipping point if we don't move. We don't have much time, and this example is one example of just how we can contribute to the reduction of CO2 emissions. But when you see how many people we are here, are you capable to convince 10 people around you this evening that there's a next step to be made, and it must be made tomorrow, not after tomorrow? I mean, summing up, also, I have great debate with my own family about that. values, sharing values. Okay, Dad, yeah, you're into that, but yeah, but we don't agree with that. We don't agree with that because we're comfortably installed in our job position and so on, and we want to make the most of the short life that we know is coming from it. And it's, I have frequent questions or trauma almost inside of me when I say I'm trying to convince people that sustainability is something that we're all concerned with, and I can't even completely convince my own children. So how do I do with friends, colleagues, and so on? It's luckily meeting people like Noé that give me more optimism in a thing. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for being with us. And I hope that the sustainability aspect of Eleusis 2021 will continue. I know with Elena we will be involved in next September or for the first edition, the pilot edition of the Eco Culture Festival part. So we're lucky to see you then. And have a good evening. Have a good follow-up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.